But first tonight, chilling new footage from that notorious rally on the Opera House steps shows protesters chanting Allahu Akbar and declaring support for Hamas, saying the terrorists have a right to fight. This extraordinary new vision comes as the Palestine Action Group wants to yet again stage a protest at the Opera House this weekend, with the case being heard in court tomorrow. I've also obtained footage of the speech made by Asala Sahara, who was with the Palestine Action Group at the time, and she helped organise that Opera House rally. She said in her speech that Hamas has the right to resist. These comments just 2 days after 1,200 innocent babies, children, parents and the elderly were gunned down in cold blood.
So to anyone who comes out with an argument that says Hamas is a terrorist organisation, let me tell you that it is internationally recognised that we Palestinians as Hamas have a right to resist.
She also defended Hamas as fighting against colonialists.
I will say it loud, loud as I can. Hamas practices anti-colonialism.
And she urged the crowd to use the word Sahayani, meaning Zionist, and not the word Yahud, which means Jew.
Please use the word Sahayana, not the word Yahud.
The current Palestine Action Group organiser, Josh Lees, also said he supports Palestinians when they fight back. Now, again, these comments were just 48 hours after the worst massacre of Jews since the Holocaust.
And we're on the side of the Palestinians, not just when they're the victims and being massacred. We're also on the side of the Palestinians when they fight back.
But it wasn't only the speakers. The hatred among many in the crowd towards Jews was truly terrifying. This was anti-Semitism unleashed. Have a look at the clearest footage yet, never broadcast before.
Where's the Jews? Where's the Jews? Where's the Jews? Where's the Jews? Allahu Akbar! The Jews! The Jews!
And in another clip previously reported, so this next one is previously reported by Crikey, a protester yells, "We're going to kill them all." Here it is. These chants of hatred cannot be defended in the name of free expression. This is blatant anti-Semitism that's dangerous in our society. It also makes the city inaccessible for Jews and jeopardises public security. It's an issue of both physical and mental safety. And it would be simply outrageous and appalling if sensible and rational and educated Court of Appeal judges tomorrow allow a repeat of this despicable and vile spectacle at our national icon. Now, a reminder, this hatred of Jews at the Opera House was on October the 9th. 2 days earlier, on October 7, hundreds of Palestinian terrorists invaded Israel on motorbike, on foot and on paragliders. It was 6:29 a.m. 2 years ago today when they breached the border of Israel. The terrorists stormed Israeli communities, going from house to house to house, shooting every living person and then setting it all alight. They stormed the Nova Music Festival where 378 young, bright boys and girls were hunted down and killed. In total, 1,200 Israelis were slaughtered in a matter of hours by Hamas. The terrorists celebrated, some ringing their families in Gaza to say just how many Jews they had killed, and a warning: this is disturbing.
يابا قاعد بكلمك من جوال يهودية قتلتها وقتلت جوزها 10 بيدي يابا قتلت 10 يابا 10 بيدي قتلت يابا افتح الوقت شوف كيف قتلت يابا.
There are too many haunting stories to recount, but I often think about little Abigail, just 3 years old. She was grabbed by terrorists and taken into Gaza alone, without her parents, a 3-year-old, a hostage for 50 days. Imagine a 3-year-old being separated from her family, from her home, from every comfort, and taken into captivity by cruel terrorists who wouldn't even let her cry or speak a word. When she was eventually released under a hostage deal, she came back to Israel to find out that her parents had been murdered. She was an orphan. Her aunt spoke to me about the anguish of campaigning to free Abigail.
After her father was murdered and she crawled out from his body covered in his blood, she went to a neighbor, and miraculously he was opening the door to go out and protect the kibbutz, and there was little Abigail, and he put her with his wife and 3 kids, and they knew each other. Abigail knew this family, and when they were taken off by Hamas terrorists, Abigail was with her. And I prayed that during the whole 51 days that she was with this woman, Hagar Brodich, and she was.
Baby Kafir, his brother Ariel, and their mother Shiri Bibas were also abducted by terrorists. We would learn much later that they never stood a chance. Those beautiful little boys, 9 months old and 4 years old, were murdered in Gaza by bare hands. Their bodies in coffins later paraded by Hamas on stage in a sickening display before cheering crowds. These murders, these kidnappings, are the atrocities that were unfolding when the heartless Opera House protest took place, where Hamas was lauded and the mob chanted, "Where's the Jews?" and "Kill the Jews." Just 48 hours earlier, terrorists had hunted for Jews in Israel. And here's what isn't understood enough in Australia, is that this isn't about Israel, it's about Jews. Henry Ergas, brilliant columnist, he writes in the Australian today that the Manchester terrorist Jihad al-Shami didn't have the IDF in his sights when he rammed a car into a synagogue. Henry writes, no, that layer of hypocrisy had been stripped away. What he wanted was to murder Jews. And we're facing the same threat here in Australia, where synagogues have been firebombed and targeted. There's no attempt to even hide this, with protesters chanting about Jews and Zionists and Intifada. So almost from the day of the Hamas attacks, it exposed a latent underlying problem in our community where thousands of Australians, or people living in Australia, clearly didn't share our common Judeo-Christian values that centre on a peaceful existence. Now, Australia has been fighting wars in the Middle East alongside our allies since after the 9/11 attacks, including against ISIS in Iraq and Syria. Now, since that time, and perhaps partly driven by migration, there's a new deep-seated hatred of the Jewish community and Israel. This has spread to universities and other institutions where it's become popularised as the latest modern trend in protest. Now, on the surface, it's against Israel. But scratch at it, wafer thin, and there's a clear and disgusting exhibition of hatred against the Jewish community. This new Opera House footage confirms it. The chants by protesters about hunting for Jews and killing Jews.
Where's the Jews? Where's the Jews? Where's the Jews? Where's the Jews? Allahu Akbar!
The absence of clear-cut, decisive leadership from October 8 onwards allowed the darkest parts of the community, the most un-Australian parts, to rise to the surface. And this anti-Jewish sentiment has been bubbling along most weekends at protests in the heart of our capital cities ever since. It's a runaway train of hatred. It's been allowed to get out of control by leaders who should know better. These leaders might give eloquent speeches in Parliament, as we heard from the Prime Minister today, where he said all the right things about October 7.
The Australian Government stands with Jewish people around the world who feel the cold shadow of history's darkest chapter in any act of anti-Semitism. We will always stand against anti-Semitism, as should everyone.
But in reality, the nice words of our national leaders today have been rendered meaningless by their actions. I know not everyone wants to hear this, but on the anniversary of October 7, I am going to speak more openly and frankly about the lived experience of life since then. I can't overstate the shock of the past 2 years to the Jewish community. From the moment we saw that unadulterated hatred on the Opera House steps until now, we felt dismay and hurt. Everything we knew, the safety and security of life, acceptance among our fellow citizens, has been ripped away, replaced by fear, anguish, and despair. We've been ostracised, isolated, and shockingly betrayed by those at the very top who are supposed to act as guardians of society, protecting civility and upholding the law. It's a massive betrayal when our political leaders allowed this hatred for Jews to become the norm because of votes, politics, and a stunning lack of courage, all unacceptable excuses. There's nothing that justifies what we've been dealing with, what we've been living with. And even worse, politicians effectively encouraged it by falsely demonising Israel. Instead of being clear-eyed about why Israel remained at war, because hostages were in Gaza and the terrorists had not been defeated and were vowing to repeat the atrocities over and over again, our leaders didn't explain this to the public. Instead, they deliberately vilified Israel, falsely painting it as an immoral aggressor that targeted civilians and was effectively committing war crimes. It's a distorted understanding of events in the Middle East, and these lines trick the public into thinking wrong is right. It's a modern-day propaganda campaign prosecuted on social media, spreading hate and misinformation. These lies only then exacerbated the racism and hostility toward the Jewish community in Australia. Too few in public life have found the courage to call out this hatred. It's not freedom of expression in the name of multiculturalism. It's pure hatred against fellow Australians. And if you question this, then why do the pro-Palestinians want a rally this Sunday? The Arab nations have broadly endorsed Trump's peace plan. Israel has suspended military operations, and even Hamas has agreed to it in principle. So why are there protests? The inescapable answer is that they're designed to intimidate the Jewish community on the week of the second anniversary of October 7. Now, again, this was what was chanted 2 years ago.
Where's the Jews? Where's the Jews? Where's the Jews? Where's the Jews? Allahu Akbar! The Jews! The Jews! The Jews!
Over the past 2 years, my voice has worn thin, appealing for stronger and better leadership. And so absent was the leadership that we convened our Anti-Semitism Summit in February. 9 of the recommendations were subsequently adopted by Gillian Segal in her report to government. And yet, still no action. Why is it so controversial to stop racism against Jews? This should be the least contentious action imaginable. The longer this goes on, the more it becomes apparent that it's radical, extremist, Islamist hatred allowed to play out on our streets, and then supported by a small, idiotic band of leftist and professional protesters. But what does also become apparent is that the vast majority of the quiet Australians are fundamentally disgusted by this aggression and hostility. And also, it's clear that the Jewish community has tapped into an ancient DNA of resilience and strength, drawn from intrinsic values of empathy, kindness, inclusion, and tolerance. These are underlying values that Australia treasures. And I pray that a year from now, on the 3rd anniversary of October 7, the war will be over and we won't be dealing with this same strain of vile intolerance in our country. That those in a position of authority would have found their voice to say enough is enough and to enforce the law and to ensure that peace returns to our streets so we can stop living in fear, protected only by armed security.